Except for the Golden Gate Bridge, it is, or I should say they are, San Francisco's most visible symbol. The country's only moving national monument, the cable cars. Well, believe it or not, as beloved as they are now, there was a time when people wanted to get rid of them. Well, our next guest, the executive director of San Francisco Beautiful, Darcy Brown, can tell us how her organization is inextricably linked with the cable cars. Darcy, welcome.
Thank you.
I remember learning about the almost demise of the cable cars and how, quote unquote, a little old lady, a housewife named Friedel Klusman saved the cable cars. How did that happen and how did it give birth to you?
Well, at that time, 1947, it was after the war and everybody had cars. And even in 1947, the cable car was an antique and extremely expensive to upkeep. All of the parts had to be made especially for the cable car, as they still do today. We make all of the parts ourselves. So it was very expensive, and Mayor Lapham wanted to lighten up the budget. Doesn't everybody? So, so he decided, we don't need these cable cars, and started ripping them up. And Friedel Klusman said, not so fast. And he said, sorry, this is progress. And so she went to the ballot and won overwhelmingly at the ballot.
And that is why we now have them today, and they're now a National Historic Landmark.
That's correct. They cannot be removed from San Francisco. So
how did that battle, which thankfully Friedel and her colleagues win, give birth to San Francisco Beautiful?
So after that win, Friedel decided, well, we can do a lot more to help the city, and started the first tree planting program throughout San Francisco, a trash program throughout San Francisco. That developed into a love of the ballot box. So, several things were taken to the ballot box, such as stopping the proliferation of billboards throughout the city. San Francisco Beautiful is responsible for the ability for everyone in San Francisco to eat outside. We enabled San Franciscans' cafes to have outdoor seating. We are responsible for the checkbox that people can check, that started the Community Challenge Grant, the Graffiti Advisory Board, the San Francisco Arts Commission. So a lot of things are the niceties of San Francisco Beautiful is responsible for.
Why isn't there a statue to Friedel Klusman in Union Square? I mean, we've got, you know, on the top of that statue in the middle of Union Square, supposedly modeled after one of San Francisco's great heroines, Alma Spreckles. Right. It strikes me that maybe Friedel should be on the top of that.
It's very possible, but she does have a turnaround, the cable car turnaround above the Hyde Street Pier. There's a lovely memorial to her. So we do have a presence. She does have a presence in San Francisco and connected to the cable cars, which is appropriate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you know, there's so many nonprofits and organizations that do good in San Francisco, but so much of what makes San Francisco special, the quote-unquote European atmosphere of the city, really started with Friedel and the work of San Francisco Beautiful.
Well, that's correct. The mission of San Francisco Beautiful is to, you know, preserve our civic beauty and our neighborhood character, because San Francisco is very prideful of our neighborhoods, as well as now, and has always been, a big friend of the arts. For example, Muni Art, which is a program that we started in 2015, is really a groundbreaking program for artists that are up and coming in the art world, because the contest is one of very few in the country that is open to artists without a list of prerequisites,
right,
professional prerequisites. So this is a groundbreaking program that we do with the SFMTA that turns 100 Muni buses, regular Muni buses, into rolling art galleries once a year for 4 months. So this year was, we kicked off in January, as we do every year, and we have 100 Muni art galleries rolling throughout the city right now, and will be through April and into May.
Yeah, you know, there's so much controversy in the world. It must be nice to work for an organization whose mission is to keep San Francisco beautiful. I mean, is there anyone who opposes what you do?
No. No, they can be a little wary. Developers can be a little wary because they think that San Francisco Beautiful is more of a NIMBY organization than we are,
right?
Which we are not. So that happens. But no, on the whole, people are pretty supportive of our mission and what we're doing
Yeah,
here.
I wouldn't say, I've never heard San Francisco Beautiful referred to as a not in my backyard organization. It sounds to me like an organization that just keeps your backyard beautiful, which is good for you and, frankly, for the property values of the neighbors.
Exactly.
But you raise an interesting point. Talk to me about how San Francisco Beautiful would work with a potential developer. So you have developer A who's building a big thing downtown. At what point does San Francisco Beautiful become involved in the process, and in what way?
We really don't, but we're starting to see an opportunity to work with developers to bring in accessible public art. Right now, you know, San Francisco Beautiful traditionally, not San Francisco Beautiful, but San Franciscans have always been traditionally opposed to a gated community. But actually, when you think about it, the buildings that are being built right now are just vertical gated communities. They're impenetrable, which is making the streets rather soulless. And so we see an opportunity to expand a public art accessibility program in partnership with those developers. For example, on March 22nd at the Corrett Auditorium, we are hosting a panel discussion from 5:30 to 7:30 that brings together members of the arts community as well as Supervisor Aaron Peskin to discuss exactly this topic. Let's expand opportunities for artists in San Francisco, such as Muni Art, making public art more accessible for all, and also expanding opportunities for the artists themselves.
Right. So just this past weekend, I was driving south of Market through what I thought, ironically enough, was the Design District, which has become basically a homeless encampment. I mean, there's several hundred people living there literally under a bridge. What do you say to people who say, you know, San Francisco Beautiful is really nice, but we need to spend our money other ways?
I think we need both. You know, San Francisco's creative soul has always been present, and that is what has differentiated San Francisco from other cities across the country and made it accessible. That has fueled our tolerance and just the artistic attraction of the city. That is the soul of San Francisco. That soul is being threatened by these vertical gated communities of these buildings of glass and steel. And I understand that we can't live in a museum. That's a given. But if the city is going to be changing, we need to preserve the soul of the city. And that soul has an artistic heart.
So talk to me a little bit about the current state of the arts from your point of view, from San Francisco Beautiful's point of view. What are some of the projects that you have in the pipeline that you're most interested in? And if you can, you know, comment a little bit on those who say, which you hear a lot in the media nowadays, that, oh, San Francisco's artists they're being outpriced. We don't have that great artistic soul that we used to. Do you think that's true?
I think it's threatened, and I think that that's one of the reasons why on March 22nd we're hosting this panel. I think that the arts community now more than ever has to pull together, and there may be a legislative component involved here that has to take place that stipulates artists' housing and artist studio space. We addressed that in our last ballot for the teachers, to protect teachers with affordable housing, and I think that there has to be one for artists as well, because we are losing a lot of our artists here in San Francisco.
So talk a little bit about that. San Francisco Beautiful does take a legislative tack, correct? So you do endorse legislation? Do you put legislation on the ballot?
We do. We are an advocacy group, definitely, and we have a long history of advocating on behalf of San Francisco through the ballot. And that was the inception of the organization. Right. You know, to save the cable cars. When Friedel Klusman went into Lapham and tried to say, you know, be reasonable, he wasn't going to be reasonable, so she put it on the ballot. Right, right. If you say no, you just say, okay, well, we'll go right to the people. That's correct. Has San Francisco Beautiful ever lost a battle? Not to date, no. Touch wood. Yeah, yeah. No, we haven't. So what are some of the battles coming up? I would say expanding public art. I would also say that our historical decor is under threat. Our historic lamps, for example. The so-called Path of Gold along Market Street. Path of Gold, and similar ones. You know, Van Ness, we're having transit corridors redesigned. And with that redesign, I don't think that we should lose track of the historic decor that makes San Francisco, San Francisco. Right, and I mean, because who can think of San Francisco without the cable cars, for instance? Exactly, or giving that historic reference. You know, I think that that's important. Again, it adds to the richness of a city's of experiencing a city, is when you have those historic touchstones. And I think that, you know, all the change is fabulous. And as I say, we can't live in a museum, but we do need to have a nod towards our history, which is unique and it's special and it can't be duplicated, because once that history is lost, once that decor is destroyed and replaced, it won't come back.
Yeah, all you have to do is visit China, which I have over the last few years for business, and you see cities which are gleaming and incredible and full of high-speed trains and no history,
right,
because they literally bulldoze over
right,
their history. We've only got about a minute left. Talk to me about some of the projects upcoming that you're most excited about. You mentioned the Van Ness Corridor. I'd love to know how San Francisco Beautiful is taking part in that. But also, what do you think is the most threatened historic I don't say monument, or just something that you're trying to preserve in the city that you think is most threatened?
The street lamps on Van Ness.
Yeah.
They want
same answer for both questions. Yeah.
SFMTA redesigned it, and in one design they have the historic street lamps, and in another one they disappeared. And we went, wait a minute, what happened to the historic street lamps?
And if it hadn't been for San Francisco Beautiful going, where did those go?
Right.
It would just have been gone.
Gone. Mm-hmm.
So what's the result? Are we going to keep them or not?
We can't keep them because they are decrepit, and their original purpose does not cannot be utilized for the new purpose that they need them for mm-hmm. this LED lights and everything. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have replication, but at least there's a nod to history there.
Right.
You know, so things like that. We're always on the alert for our history, our historical decor being threatened by improvements, which, right, you know, Lapham thought was an improvement to rip out the cable cars originally. Right. So sometimes improvements, we have to, wait a minute, let's take a real long look at this before we start ripping them out, because can you imagine, had Lapham destroyed all the cable cars, they'd be gone. They'd
be gone. And you know, it would be much less than Rice-A-Roni not having a TV ad. It would be the real living soul of San Francisco.
Right, and you can't put them back. Because can you imagine passing a bill, oh, we're going to have $1 billion so that we can dig up the streets and put in tracks and replace the cable cars? That would never happen.
Never happen again. Well, it sounds like the spirit of Friedel Klusman is still alive and well.
Thank you so much, David.
Thanks, Darcy, for being with us.
My pleasure.
We've been speaking with Darcy Brown of San Francisco Beautiful, and I have to tell you, if it weren't for people like Friedel Klusman and Darcy fighting for our historic perspective, well, it can't come back, so support San Francisco Beautiful. Next up, our conversation with Blake Tucker, someone who knows all about Star Wars, photography, and hip-hop dance. We'll be right back.